The iron gates of Ashford Manor clanged shut behind the carriage. Eleanor pressed her face against the cold glass window, watching her stepmother's face disappear into the fog. No tears came. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Her hands trembled in her lap. The rough fabric of her old grey dress scratched against her wrists. It was the only dress they had let her keep. Everything else had been sold or given to her stepsisters. The carriage wheels bumped along the rutted road, taking her further from everything she had ever known. "You're lucky we found anyone to take you," her stepmother had said that morning. "A burden like you. Plain, poor, past marriageable age at 23. The leper colony needs workers. They'll feed you. That's more than you deserve." Eleanor's fingers found the small silver locket hidden beneath her dress. It had been her mother's. It was all she had left of love. The carriage driver hadn't spoken a single word to her. He wore a cloth wrapped around his face. Fear of contagion, she supposed. Fear of the place where he was taking her. The road grew rougher. Trees pressed close on both sides, their bare branches like skeleton fingers against the grey sky. It was January, cold and bitter. Eleanor pulled her thin shawl tighter. She had no coat. Coats were for people who mattered. After 3 hours, the carriage stopped. The driver climbed down and opened her door. He pointed toward a long dirt path that disappeared into thick woods. At the end, barely visible through the trees, stood a stone wall. "Walk that way," he said. His voice was rough. "Someone will meet you." He didn't help her down. He didn't hand her the single small bag with her few belongings. He just dropped it in the dirt and climbed back onto his seat. Eleanor stood alone on the empty road as the carriage rolled away. The silence pressed against her ears. She picked up her bag and started walking. The path was muddy from recent rain. Her worn shoes were soaked through within minutes. The cold seeped into her bones. The stone wall grew taller as she approached. It was old, covered with moss and ivy. A heavy wooden door stood in the center, bound with iron. Eleanor raised her hand to knock, but the door swung open before she could touch it. An old woman stood there. Her face was scarred, but her eyes were kind. She wore simple grey clothing and a white cap. She looked Eleanor up and down, taking in the wet shoes, the threadbare dress, the exhausted face. "You're the new girl," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Come in. You look half frozen." She stepped aside and Eleanor walked through the doorway. Behind the wall was a courtyard. Stone buildings surrounded it on 3 sides. Everything was neat and clean, not at all what Eleanor had expected. "I'm Martha," the woman said. "I run the household here. You'll work in the main house. His Grace needs someone who can read and write. Can you do that?" Eleanor blinked. "His Grace? I thought this was a leper colony." Martha's mouth twitched. "It is. His Grace lives here. Come. He's expecting you." Eleanor followed Martha across the courtyard. Her mind spun with confusion. A duke living in a leper colony. It made no sense. Martha led her into the largest building and down a long hallway. The floors were stone, but covered with thick rugs. Paintings hung on the walls. Whatever this place was, it wasn't the horror she had imagined. Martha stopped before a heavy oak door. She knocked twice and pushed it open. "The new girl is here. Your Grace, send her in." The voice from inside was deep, slightly rough, but unmistakably cultured. The voice of an educated man. Eleanor stepped into the room. It was a library. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a massive fireplace. Candles burned on every surface, filling the room with warm light. And standing with his back to her, looking out a tall window, was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered. His hair was dark, touched with grey at the temples. He wore expensive clothing, the kind Eleanor's father used to wear before he died. A gentleman's coat and perfectly tailored trousers. His hands were clasped behind his back. "You may approach," he said without turning. Eleanor walked forward, her wet shoes squeaking on the polished floor. She stopped a few feet behind him, waiting, her heart hammered in her chest. Slowly, he turned to face her. Eleanor's breath caught. The right side of his face was perfect. Strong jaw, high cheekbone, intelligent, dark eyes. But the left side bore the unmistakable marks of disease. Scarred skin, slightly twisted features. He watched her face carefully, waiting for the familiar reaction of disgust or fear. Eleanor met his eyes steadily. She had been called ugly her whole life. She knew what it was to be judged by appearance. She curtsied low, as her mother had taught her years ago. "Your Grace." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps. He studied her for a long moment. She was thin, too thin. Her brown hair was pulled back severely. Her dress was shabby, but she held herself with quiet dignity, and her eyes were clear and calm. "You are Eleanor Ashford," he said. "Your stepmother sold you to work here for room and board. She said you were useless, unmarriageable, and a burden. Is this true?" Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "She did say those things, Your Grace. Whether they are true, you must judge for yourself." His eyebrow rose slightly. "Martha says you can read and write. Is this so?" "Yes, Your Grace. My father educated me before he died." "Can you keep accounts, manage correspondence, read Latin?" "I can do the first two. My Latin is not strong." He moved closer. Eleanor forced herself to stand still, though every instinct told her to step back. He was intimidating, not because of his scarred face, but because of the intensity in his eyes. He looked at her as if he could read her thoughts. "I am Alexander Weston, Duke of Ravencroft," he said. "I came to this place 5 years ago when disease marked my face. Society cannot bear to look upon me, so I removed myself from society. I live here among others who suffer from similar afflictions, but I still maintain my business affairs and estates. I need someone to help me with correspondence and accounts. If you prove capable, you will have a room, food, clothing, and a small salary. If you prove incapable, you will work in the kitchens or laundry instead. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Grace." "You may begin tomorrow. Martha will show you to your room. You look exhausted. Rest tonight." He turned back to the window, dismissing her. Eleanor curtsied again and left the room, her mind whirling. Martha was waiting in the hallway. She led Eleanor up a flight of stairs to a small room on the second floor. It was simple but clean. A narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a small desk and chair. A window looked out over the courtyard. After the cold attic room she had shared with the servants at her stepmother's house, it seemed like luxury. "I'll bring you hot water for washing," Martha said, "and dinner will be sent up. You start work at 8 tomorrow morning. Don't be late. His Grace values punctuality." She paused at the door. "He's not as frightening as he seems, you know. He's just lonely and angry at the world. Can't say I blame him." Eleanor nodded. After Martha left, she sat on the bed and finally let herself feel the weight of the day. She had been sent away like garbage, sold to a leper colony as if she had no value at all. But strangely, she didn't feel the despair she expected. The Duke had looked at her and asked if she could read and write. Not if she was pretty, not if she was young. He had asked about her mind. That was something new. She ate the simple dinner that was brought to her, washed with the hot water, and climbed into bed. The sheets were clean and smelled of lavender. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight she was warm and safe. It was more than she'd had in a long time. Eleanor woke to soft morning light streaming through her window. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The leper colony. The Duke, with the scarred face. Her new position. She dressed quickly in the same grey dress. She had no other. After braiding her hair, she made her way downstairs. Martha met her in the hallway and led her to a small dining room. Bread, butter, jam, and tea waited on the table. Eleanor's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten properly in weeks. "Eat quickly," Martha said. "His Grace is already in the library. He rises early." Eleanor ate as fast as politeness allowed. The bread was fresh, the tea hot and sweet, simple food, but it tasted like heaven. When she finished, Martha showed her to the library. The Duke sat at a massive desk, covered with papers, ledgers, and letters. He looked up as she entered. "You're punctual. Good." He gestured to a smaller desk near the window. "That will be yours. Sit." Eleanor sat. He brought over a stack of letters. "These arrived yesterday from my estate in Yorkshire. Read them and summarize the contents. Write your summaries clearly. I will review them after." He returned to his own work. Eleanor opened the first letter. It was from a land steward, reporting on repairs needed to tenant cottages. She read carefully, taking notes. Her handwriting was neat and clear. Just as her father had taught her, she worked through the stack methodically, losing herself in the task. Hours passed. The Duke didn't speak except to ask her to bring him various ledgers. She noticed he moved stiffly when he rose from his chair, as if his body pained him, but his mind was sharp. He worked through complex accounts with impressive speed. At noon, Martha brought a tray with lunch, soup, bread, and cheese. She set it between Eleanor's desk and the Duke's. "You both need to eat," she said firmly. The Duke looked up, seeming surprised to see food. "I forget the time when I'm working," he said. "I know, Your Grace. That's why I come whether you ring or not." Martha left with a knowing smile. The Duke brought his bowl to Eleanor's desk and sat in the chair across from her. She froze, unsure what to do. He ate without speaking for several minutes. Then he said, "How did you learn to write so clearly?" "My father taught me, Your Grace." He said clear handwriting reflected a clear mind. He was a wise man. He was. Eleanor's voice softened. "He died when I was 15. After that, everything changed." The Duke studied her face. "Your stepmother treated you poorly." It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. "She never wanted me. I was a reminder of my father's first wife. She had daughters of her own to care for. So she sold you to a leper colony." His voice was bitter. "Because you were inconvenient." Eleanor met his eyes. "And because she was afraid I might somehow take resources from her daughters, afraid I might want something for myself. Fear makes people cruel." The Duke's expression shifted. "You speak from experience. Don't we all, Your Grace?" Eleanor's voice was gentle. "You're here because people feared looking at you. I'm here because my stepmother feared my existence. Fear has brought us both to this place." Silence fell between them. The Duke finished his soup without another word. When Martha came to collect the dishes, he returned to his desk, but Eleanor noticed he glanced at her several times during the afternoon, not studying her appearance, but watching the way she worked, the care she took with each letter. "At 6, he said, "that's enough for today. Tomorrow we'll go through your summaries together. You may go." Eleanor stood and curtsied. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Ashford, you did well today." She turned back. He was looking at her with something that might have been respect. "Thank you, Your Grace." In her room that night, Eleanor felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or purpose. The Duke was difficult and distant, but he had treated her like a person with value. He had seen her work, not just her plain face. It was more than anyone had offered her in 8 long years. The days began to form a pattern. Eleanor arrived in the library each morning at 8. The Duke was always there first. Already deep in his work, they labored side by side in companionable silence. He corrected her mistakes patiently, teaching her the complexities of managing vast estates. She learned about crop rotations, tenant rights, investment accounts, and legal documents. Sometimes he dictated letters while she wrote. His voice was rich and cultured when he spoke of business. But occasionally, when they paused for tea or lunch, he would mention something else. A book he was reading, a memory from before the illness struck. These glimpses into his mind fascinated Eleanor. He was educated, well-traveled, and surprisingly thoughtful. Not at all the bitter recluse she'd expected. One afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrival, Eleanor was organizing books that had been delivered from London. She was standing on a ladder, reaching for a high shelf, when her foot slipped. She gasped, arms flailing. Strong hands caught her waist, steadying her. The Duke had crossed the room in an instant. "Careful," he said. His hands were warm even through her dress. Eleanor's heart raced, though whether from the fall or his touch, she wasn't certain. He helped her down from the ladder. For a moment, they stood very close. She could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, see the way his jaw tightened. "Thank you, Your Grace," she whispered. He stepped back quickly, as if burned. "Be more careful, Miss Ashford. I don't wish to lose a competent secretary to a broken neck." He returned to his desk, but Eleanor noticed his hands weren't quite steady as he picked up his pen. She touched her waist where his hands had been, feeling the lingering warmth. Something had shifted in that moment, something neither of them was ready to name. That evening, Martha brought Eleanor 3 new dresses. They were simple, but well made, in soft blues and greens. "His Grace ordered them," Martha said your current dress was unsuitable for your position." Eleanor ran her fingers over the smooth fabric. No one had bought her new clothes in years. Her throat tightened with emotion. It was a practical gift, not personal, but still he had noticed. He had cared enough to address her need. The next morning she wore the blue dress. When she entered the library, the Duke looked up. His eyes traveled over her slowly, taking in how the color brought out the gold in her brown eyes, how the better fit revealed she had a graceful figure despite her thinness. Something flickered across his face. He looked away quickly. "Good morning, Miss Ashford. There are letters to sort." But his voice was rougher than usual, and throughout the day, Eleanor caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. The air between them felt different, charged with something neither dared acknowledge. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. The trees around the compound began to bud. Eleanor had been there for 3 months. She had gained weight from regular meals. Her face had lost its haunted look. She moved through the house with quiet confidence, greeting the other residents with kind words. Many lived in the smaller buildings around the courtyard. Some were terribly scarred, others showed only minor signs of illness. All of them had been cast out by society, but here they had found a strange sort of family. Eleanor learned their stories. Thomas had been a soldier, Sarah had been a governess, William had been a merchant. All had lost everything when illness marked them. The Duke provided for them all. He used his vast wealth to create this sanctuary. Eleanor began to understand the kind of man he truly was. Not bitter, despite appearances, but generous, protective, and deeply lonely. One evening, Eleanor was working late in the library. The Duke had gone to dine, but she wanted to finish transcribing a lengthy contract. She didn't hear him return until he spoke behind her. "You work too hard, Miss Ashford." She jumped slightly, then smiled up at him. "I learned from the best, Your Grace." He moved to stand beside her desk. "You've been here 3 months. Are you well treated? Is the work acceptable?"
"Very much so." Eleanor set down her pen.
"I'm grateful for the opportunity, Your Grace." "You need not be grateful. You earn your keep." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "But I wonder if you find it lonely here. You have no companions your age. No society." Eleanor laughed softly. "Your Grace, I was never part of society. Even before my father died, we were minor gentry at best. After he was gone, I became a servant in my own home. This life you've given me is far better than what I left behind. Still, a young woman should have more than work and loneliness. And what of you?" The words slipped out before Eleanor could stop them. "You're lonely too. I see it in your eyes." The Duke stiffened. For a moment Eleanor feared she had overstepped terribly, but then his shoulders sagged slightly. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "I had everything once," he said quietly. "Title, wealth, respect. I was engaged to be married. Then this disease struck. It came suddenly, viciously. In a matter of weeks, my face was transformed. My fiancé took one look at me and broke our engagement. Society whispered that I was cursed. My own mother couldn't bear to see me. So I came here. Better to be among honest outcasts than dishonest nobility." Eleanor stood and walked to his side. "They were fools to reject you. All of them." He turned to look at her. "You say that, but you don't understand. I was a handsome man once. Sought after. Now I'm a monster." "You're not a monster." Eleanor's voice was fierce. "You're a duke who protects people society has thrown away. You're a man who reads poetry and manages estates with wisdom. You're someone who notices when a woman needs a new dress. That's not monstrous. That's nobility in its truest form." He stared at her, something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "Why don't you fear me, Miss Ashford? Everyone else does. Even Martha, who is kind, still sees the disease first." "Because I know what it's like to be judged unfairly," Eleanor said simply. "I was called ugly, useless and unwanted. Not because it was true, but because people chose to see only what they wanted to see. When I look at you, I see a good man. The scars don't change that." The Duke's hand lifted, as if he might touch her face. But he caught himself and let it fall. "You are extraordinary, Eleanor Ashford. I suspect you don't even know it." He had used her first name. Eleanor's breath caught. They stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, close enough to see the rapid pulse at his throat. The air between them hummed with possibility. Then the clock chimed 9, breaking the spell. The Duke stepped back. "It's late. You should retire." Eleanor nodded, though she felt as if something important had almost happened, and slipped away. "Good night, Your Grace." "Alexander," he said. "When we're alone, you may call me Alexander." Eleanor's heart soared. "Good night, Alexander." His smile transformed his face. Even with the scars, it was beautiful. "Good night, Eleanor." That night, Eleanor lay in bed with her mind racing. Something had changed between them. Something profound and terrifying and wonderful. She knew she was falling in love with him. the Duke of Ravencroft. A man so far above her station that it would have been laughable under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. Here behind these walls, the usual rules didn't seem to apply. She touched her lips, wondering what it would be like to kiss him. Then she shook her head at her own foolishness. He was a duke. She was nobody. He might use her first name in private, but that didn't mean he saw her as anything more than a competent employee. She needed to guard her heart before it was too late. But as she drifted towards sleep, she couldn't stop remembering the way he had looked at her, as if she was someone precious, someone worth knowing. No one had ever looked at her that way before. The next morning brought unexpected chaos. A carriage arrived at the gates just after breakfast. Martha rushed into the library looking flustered. "Your Grace, it's your brother. Lord Weston has come." Alexander's face darkened. "Send him in." Eleanor began to gather her papers to leave, but Alexander raised a hand. "Stay, I want you here." A moment later, a man strode into the library. He looked similar to Alexander, but unscared. Handsome in a conventional way, with the same dark hair and strong features. His expensive clothing and confident bearing marked him as a man accustomed to society's best treatment. He stopped short when he saw Eleanor. "Alexander, I came as soon as I heard the rumors." His eyes swept over Eleanor dismissively. "I see they were true. You've taken up with some common woman." Eleanor felt heat rise to her face, but Alexander stood slowly. His voice was ice. "Miss Ashford is my secretary. She assists with estate business. Mind your tongue, Henry." Henry laughed. "It's a female secretary. Really, Alexander? It's unseemly. People are talking." "People always talk. What do you want, Henry?" "Mother is ill. She's asking for you." Alexander's jaw tightened. "The same mother who couldn't bear to look at me after I fell ill, who agreed I should exile myself rather than shame the family. She's dying. Alexander, she wants to make peace." Silence filled the library. Eleanor could see the struggle on Alexander's face. Pain, anger, longing, all warring together. Finally he said, "I'll consider it. Now leave. Think quickly. She may not last the month." Henry glanced at Eleanor again. "And brother, do be careful. A man in your position is vulnerable to fortune hunters, even plain ones with sad stories." Alexander's hand clenched into a fist. "Get out. Now." Henry left with an unpleasant smile. When the door closed, Alexander sank into his chair. He looked suddenly older, exhausted. Eleanor wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, but she wasn't sure if it would be welcome. "He's wrong," she said quietly. "About me. I want nothing from you except honest work." Alexander looked up at her. "I know, I never thought otherwise." He rubbed his face. "My mother, I haven't seen her in 5 years. She wrote once in all that time to tell me I was right to leave society." "But she's your mother," Eleanor said, "and she's dying. Whatever pain exists between you, perhaps there's still time to heal it. You're very wise for someone so young." "I'm not that young. 23, remember? Past marriageable age." Eleanor's tone was wry. "That's not old. That's barely the beginning of life." He stood and walked to her. "Eleanor, if I go to London, will you come with me? I still need help with correspondence. And He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "I would appreciate your company." Eleanor's heart hammered. "Yes, I'll come." He smiled. "Thank you. We'll leave in 3 days. That will give me time to arrange things here." The next 3 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Martha packed Eleanor's new dresses along with a traveling cloak Alexander purchased for her. Eleanor felt like she was in a dream. She had never been to London, never travelled in a fine carriage, never imagined she would accompany a duke anywhere. On the morning of their departure, Alexander handed her into the carriage himself. His fingers were warm and steady. Inside, the seats were cushioned and comfortable. Alexander sat across from her, not beside her, maintaining proper distance. But his eyes kept finding hers as the carriage rolled forward. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "A little," Eleanor admitted. "I don't know London, and I've never been anyone's companion on a journey before." "You're not my companion, you're my colleague." But his tone was gentle, almost affectionate. "Though I suppose you're also my friend. I consider you such, if you don't mind." "I don't mind." Eleanor's voice was soft. "I'm honored." The journey took 2 days. They stopped at coaching inns along the way. Alexander rented separate rooms, always proper and correct. But they dined together each evening, talking about books and ideas and dreams. Eleanor learned he loved poetry. He learned she had always wanted to see the ocean. They shared their loneliness, their losses, their hopes. With each mile, they grew closer. On the second evening, as they sat by the fire in a quiet inn, Alexander said, "Eleanor, I need to tell you something before we reach London." She looked up from her tea. His face was serious. "My brother was wrong about you, but he was right about one thing. People will talk when they see you with me. They'll assume terrible things, that you're my mistress, that I'm taking advantage of your position. I don't want that to hurt you." Eleanor set down her cup. "I know what people will think. I don't care. You should care. You deserve respect." "I deserve to choose my own life," Eleanor said firmly. "And I choose to help you through this difficult time. Whatever people say doesn't matter." Alexander reached across the small table and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her so deliberately. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "You're braver than anyone I've ever known." Eleanor's breath caught. "Or perhaps I just have less to lose." "I think you have everything to lose, and you risk it anyway." He held her hand a moment longer, then released it. "We should retire. Tomorrow will be a long day." But as Eleanor lay in bed that night, she could still feel the warmth of his touch. She knew she was in danger of losing her heart completely, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. Alexander was everything she'd never dared to hope for. Kind, intelligent, wounded like her. He saw her, really saw her. How could she not love him? They reached London in late afternoon. The city was overwhelming. So many people, so much noise. The buildings crowded together, tall and imposing. Alexander's townhouse was in Mayfair, an elegant Georgian structure with white columns and black railings. Servants rushed out to greet them. Eleanor felt out of place in her simple dress, but Alexander introduced her firmly. "This is Miss Ashford, my secretary. She'll be staying in the blue room. Treat her with every courtesy." The housekeeper, Mrs. Graham, looked startled but curtsied. "Yes, Your Grace." Eleanor was shown to a beautiful room with silk wallpaper and a 4-poster bed. It was far grander than anything she'd ever experienced. She stood at the window, looking out at the street below. This was Alexander's world. Wealth, power, elegance. She was just a girl from nowhere, playing at being someone important. The reality of their different stations pressed down on her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered, looking concerned. "Are you well? You looked overwhelmed when we arrived." "I'm fine, just realizing how different your life is from mine." He crossed to her side. "My life is lonely dinner parties and empty ballrooms. Your life is honest work and genuine kindness. I know which I value more. But you're a duke. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. His voice was fierce. Don't ever say that. Don't let them make you believe it. He was standing so close. Eleanor could see every detail of his face. The scars, yes, but also the strength. The beauty that went beyond physical appearance. She wanted to touch him, to close the distance between them. But she held herself still. Alexander, why did you really ask me to come with you? He looked away. Because I'm a coward. Because facing my dying mother terrifies me, and your presence makes me feel like I can survive it. Is that selfish? No, it's human. He turned back to her. And because these past months with you have been the happiest I've known in years, I didn't want that to end. Even for a few weeks. Eleanor's heart stopped. Alexander, I shouldn't have said that. Forgive me. You must rest. We visit my mother tomorrow. He left quickly, before Eleanor could respond. She sank onto the bed, her mind whirling. Had he just confessed feelings for her, or was she reading too much into words spoken by a lonely man? She didn't know, but hope bloomed dangerously in her chest. The next morning, they travelled across London to the Weston family's grand townhouse. It was even larger than Alexander's, with marble stairs and crystal chandeliers. A butler led them to an upstairs bedroom. The air smelled of sickness and flowers. An old woman lay in a massive bed, propped up by pillows. She had been beautiful once. Eleanor could see it in the bone structure, the shape of her eyes. Alexander. Her voice was weak. You came, mother. Alexander approached the bed. His face was carefully blank. Eleanor stayed near the door, trying to be invisible. Let me look at you. The Duchess studied her son's scarred face. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I was weak and foolish. I let society dictate my actions, instead of my heart. Can you forgive an old woman's cowardice? Alexander's jaw worked. Eleanor could see him fighting tears. I don't know if I can. You abandoned me when I needed you most. I know. I'll die with that regret. The Duchess's eyes found Eleanor. Who is this? Miss Eleanor Ashford, my secretary. The Duchess's eyebrows rose. Your secretary? Really, Alexander? Yes. Really. She's brilliant, capable, and kind. Everything I need in an assistant. I see. The Duchess looked between them. And is that all she is? Alexander's silence was deafening. Eleanor felt her face burn. The Duchess smiled slightly. Good. You need someone who sees you as you truly are, not the title, not the face. Just you. She reached out a trembling hand. I'm glad you're not alone. Alexander took his mother's hand. I'm still angry with you. You should be. But know that I'm proud of you. What you've done for those people at the colony. The way you've maintained your estates and honor despite everything. You're twice the man your brother will ever be. She coughed, and Alexander helped her sip water. Now go. Let me rest. Come back tomorrow. There's more I need to say. They left the sick room in silence. In the carriage, Alexander stared out the window. Eleanor didn't speak. She knew he needed time to process the visit. When they reached his townhouse, he finally turned to her. Thank you for being there. Of course. She asked if you were more than my secretary. Yes. What would you have said if she'd asked you directly? Eleanor's breath caught. This was dangerous territory, but she'd never been good at lying. I would have said that you're my employer, and I respect you greatly, but I would have been lying. His eyes darkened. What would the truth be? The truth. Eleanor's voice shook slightly. The truth is that you've become dear to me, more dear than is wise or proper. But I can't seem to help it. Alexander closed his eyes. Eleanor, I know it's impossible. You're a duke. I'm nobody. But you asked for truth. When he opened his eyes, they blazed with something that made her heart race. You keep saying you're nobody. Let me tell you what I see. I see a woman with a mind as sharp as any Oxford scholar. I see kindness that extends even to those society has rejected. I see courage in the face of cruelty. I see someone who makes me want to be better than I am. That's not nobody, Eleanor. That's everything. Eleanor couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying I've fallen in love with you. Completely. Impossibly. I tried to fight it. You work for me. You depend on me. It's not fair to burden you with my feelings, but after what you just confessed, I can't stay silent any longer. Joy burst through Eleanor like sunlight. You love me? God help me. Yes, I love you. Eleanor closed the distance between them in an instant. She cupped his scarred face in her hands, looking into his eyes. I love you too. I think I have for weeks. Alexander made a sound between a laugh and a sob. He pulled her close, holding her as if she might disappear. This is madness. I shouldn't want this. You deserve better. I deserve someone who loves me, someone who sees my worth. That's you, Alexander. That's only ever been you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His hand traced her cheek, her jaw, learning her features. You're beautiful. How did I ever think otherwise? I'm not, but I don't care, because you make me feel beautiful. You are, in every way that matters. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Eleanor rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips touched softly, tentatively, then deeper, with all the longing they'd both been fighting. It was Eleanor's first kiss. It was perfect. His arms around her, his mouth warm against hers, his heart pounding as fast as her own. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. I want to marry you, Alexander said. I know it's too soon. I know there are obstacles, but I need you to know my intentions are honorable. Marry me, Eleanor's voice rose. Alexander, your family will never accept me. Society will mock you. I don't care about society. They rejected me long ago, and my mother just gave us her blessing in her way. Your brother will fight it. Let him try. Alexander's arms tightened around her. I've spent 5 years in exile, 5 years believing I'd never have love or family or joy. Then you walked into my library and everything changed. I won't let you go, Eleanor, not for society, not for family, not for anything. Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her again and again, until they were both dizzy with happiness. When they finally separated, Alexander kept her hand in his. We'll announce it properly. After my mother passes, I want to give her peace first. But then the world will know you're mine, and I'm yours. The next week passed in a strange blend of sorrow and joy. They visited the Duchess each day. She grew weaker, but seemed at peace. She spoke to Alexander about his childhood, apologizing for her failures, blessing his future. She spoke to Eleanor too, asking about her background, her dreams. She seemed genuinely pleased that her son had found love. On the 8th day, the Duchess passed quietly in her sleep. Alexander grieved, but not with the bitter anguish Eleanor expected. His mother's apology had healed something in him. He could let her go with love instead of anger. The funeral was a grand affair. All of London society attended. Eleanor watched from a pew in the back, seeing the whispers and stares directed at Alexander. Many looked at his scarred face with poorly concealed disgust. It made her furious. These people had no idea who he truly was. After the ceremony, Henry approached Alexander. "We need to discuss Mother's will and the estate business. Come to the family house tomorrow." Alone. Eleanor felt dread settle in her stomach. She knew Henry despised her, knew he would try to drive a wedge between them. That night, she said as much to Alexander. "He can try," Alexander said calmly, "but he won't succeed. I'm going to tell him about our engagement tomorrow. Might as well get it over with. What if he finds some way to stop us?" Alexander pulled her into his arms. They were in his study, behind closed doors. He'd been stealing kisses all week, unable to keep his hands off her now that they'd admitted their feelings. "There's no legal way to stop us. I'm a duke. I can marry whom I choose. He'll bluster and threaten, but ultimately he has no power over my decisions." "I'm afraid," Eleanor admitted. "So am I, but we'll face it together." He kissed her forehead. "Trust me." The next morning, Alexander left for the family house. Eleanor tried to distract herself with correspondence, but she couldn't focus. Hours passed. Finally, at tea time, Alexander returned. His face was stormy, his jaw tight. Eleanor rushed to him. "What happened?" "Henry did exactly what I expected. He ranted about the family honor, said I was making a mockery of our name by marrying a nobody, threatened to contest it with the House of Lords." Eleanor's heart sank. "Can he do that?" "No, but he can make things unpleasant." Alexander took her hands. "He also told me something else. Something he thought would turn me against you." Fear gripped Eleanor. "What?" "He had your background investigated. He found out your stepmother wasn't lying about selling you. She actually received money for sending you to the colony. £20. You were quite literally sold like property." Eleanor felt sick. She'd suspected, but having it confirmed was horrible. "I didn't know the details. I'm sorry you had to learn that." Alexander pulled her close. "I don't care about that. What angers me is that he thought it would matter. He truly believed I'd cast you aside because of your stepmother's cruelty. It showed me how little he understands about love or honor." "What did you tell him?" "I told him we're getting married in 3 weeks, with or without his approval. I told him you're worth 100 of him, and I told him that if he ever speaks ill of you again, he'll answer to me physically, brother or not." Alexander smiled grimly. He turned an interesting shade of purple. Despite everything, Eleanor laughed. "You didn't." "I did, and it felt wonderful." He sobered. "But there's more. He's going to spread rumors about you. Try to damage your reputation before we marry. Make it seem like you've been my mistress all along, like you trapped me through seduction." Eleanor pulled away. "Maybe we should wait. Let the gossip die down." "No, absolutely not." Alexander's voice was fierce. "That's what he wants. He thinks if we wait, I'll come to my senses and change my mind. But I won't. Every day without you as my wife is a day wasted. We marry in 3 weeks as planned. Society will shun us. Society already shuns me, and you've never been part of it. We'll live at the colony if we must, build our own world, have our own family." His eyes were intense. "Say you won't leave me, Eleanor. Say you're brave enough to face this with me." Eleanor thought of the girl who arrived at the colony 4 months ago, broken, worthless, without hope. Then she thought of the woman she'd become, loved, valued, strong. Alexander had given her that. How could she abandon him now? "I won't leave you," she said firmly. "I'm not afraid of gossip. I'm only afraid of losing you." "You'll never lose me, I promise." He kissed her, and Eleanor felt her doubts melt away. They would face this together. Whatever came, they would survive it. The next 3 weeks were challenging. Henry made good on his threat. Rumors spread through London. Like wildfire, Eleanor was called a scheming opportunist who'd seduced a vulnerable, isolated duke. Crude jokes circulated about what went on at the leper colony. Several ladies of society made a point of cutting Eleanor when she appeared in public, but others surprised her. Some of the residents from the colony came to London for the wedding, determined to support their duke. Thomas, Sarah, William, and a dozen others, they faced the stares and whispers with dignity, showing London that they were people deserving of respect. Their presence moved Eleanor to tears. Martha arrived too, fussing over Eleanor's wedding dress. It was simple but beautiful, made of cream silk with delicate lace. Alexander had insisted on buying her everything new: dress, shoes, trousseau. He wanted her to feel like the duchess she would become. The night before the wedding, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, looking out at the London streets. Tomorrow, she would become a duchess. It seemed impossible. 6 months ago, she'd been nobody, unwanted, unloved. Now she was about to marry a duke who adored her. A knock at her door made her turn. Alexander entered, looking sheepish. "I know it's bad luck to see you before the wedding, but I couldn't sleep. I needed to see you." Eleanor smiled. "I couldn't sleep either." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No." "Are you?" "Good." "No. I'm just afraid I'll wake up and this will all be a dream." He cupped her face. "You've given me back my life, Eleanor. Before you, I was just existing. Now I'm living again." "You did the same for me," she whispered. "You saw worth in me when no one else did. Because it was always there. You just needed someone to recognize it." He kissed her softly. "Tomorrow, I get to call you my wife. I may be the luckiest man alive, or the most foolish, according to your brother." Alexander laughed. "Henry's always been an idiot. I stopped valuing his opinion years ago." He sobered. "Whatever comes, we face it together. Promise me you'll remember that. When society is cruel, when my family causes trouble, when doubt creeps in, we're a team." "Always, always," Eleanor echoed. She kissed him, pouring all her love and hope into it. When they parted, both were breathless. "I should go before I do something that truly would be improper," Alexander said with a crooked smile, "but I'll see you tomorrow. At the church, and then you'll be mine forever." "I'm already yours," Eleanor said. "The wedding is just a formality." His eyes blazed with love. "Nevertheless, I want that formality. I want the whole world to know you chose me." After he left, Eleanor climbed into bed with a smile. Tomorrow would be the beginning of her real life. The life she'd never dared to dream possible. The wedding took place in a small church near Alexander's townhouse. It wasn't a grand society affair, just a simple ceremony, with a few dozen guests, but it was perfect. Eleanor wore her cream silk dress with her mother's locket. Alexander wore dark, formal clothing that made him look devastatingly handsome. When she walked down the aisle toward him, his face transformed. Love, awe, and joy mingled in his expression. He looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Eleanor's heart felt too full for her chest. The vicar led them through their vows. When it came time to say "I do," both their voices rang clear and strong. Alexander slipped a gold ring on her finger. His hand shook slightly, betraying his emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Alexander cupped her face tenderly and kissed her. It was chaste, appropriate for church, but the promise in it made Eleanor's knees weak. When they turned to face their guests, she saw tears on Martha's face, smiles from the colony residents, and fury on Henry's face in the back pew. She didn't care about Henry. She was the Duchess of Ravencroft now, Alexander's wife. Her new life was beginning. The wedding breakfast was held at Alexander's townhouse. It was a small, intimate gathering. The colony residents mixed with a few of Alexander's old friends who'd proven loyal. There was laughter, toasts, and genuine celebration. Eleanor felt wrapped in warmth and acceptance. As the afternoon faded to evening, Alexander pulled her aside. "Ready to leave?" "Where are we going?" "Ravencroft Castle. My family seat in Cornwall. I haven't been there since before I fell ill. I want to take you there. Show you the ocean you've always wanted to see." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You remembered." "I remember everything you've ever told me." He kissed her hand. "Come, wife. Our carriage waits." They slipped away while the guests were distracted. In the carriage, Alexander pulled Eleanor onto his lap, kissing her deeply. "Finally alone," he murmured against her lips. "Do you know how hard it's been to keep my hands off you these past weeks?" Eleanor blushed. "Alexander, it's still daylight. I don't care. You're my wife now. I can kiss you whenever I want." He proceeded to prove it, kissing her until she was dizzy. The journey to Cornwall took 3 days. They stayed at coaching inns, and each night Alexander held her close, whispering how much he loved her. He was patient with her innocence, gentle and reassuring. Eleanor had never felt so cherished. When they finally reached Ravencroft Castle, Eleanor gasped. It stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, grey stone walls, turrets and towers. It looked like something from a fairy tale. Alexander led her through grand halls to a terrace on the western side. And there it was. The ocean, vast and blue and beautiful. Waves crashed against the rocks far below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Eleanor stood transfixed. "It's perfect," she breathed. Alexander stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "This is home now, our home. We'll fill it with love and laughter, and maybe, one day, children will build the life we both deserve." Eleanor leaned back against him, feeling completely at peace. She'd come so far from that desperate girl sold to a leper colony. She'd found love in the last place anyone would expect. With a man society had rejected, she'd found acceptance. With a man called monstrous, she'd found gentleness. "I love you," she said. "I'll love you every day for the rest of my life. And I love you. You saved me, Eleanor, in every way a person can be saved." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon. Two wounded souls who'd found healing in each other. Two outcasts who'd created their own kingdom. Two hearts that had beat alone, but now beat as one. Behind them, Ravencroft Castle glowed in the fading light. Inside, fires burned warm. Home was waiting, and for Eleanor and Alexander, the future stretched bright and beautiful, full of possibility and love. They had survived cruelty, overcome society's judgment, and found each other against all odds. Now they would face whatever came next together. Duke and Duchess, husband and wife, two halves of one whole. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Eleanor knew with certainty that she had found exactly what she'd always needed. Not wealth or status or society's approval, but love. Real, honest, transformative love. The kind that sees past scars to the beauty beneath. The kind that turns outcasts into family. The kind that lasts forever. She turned in Alexander's arms and kissed him, tasting salt from the sea air and sweetness from his love. And in that moment, standing on the edge of the ocean, wrapped in her husband's embrace, Eleanor Ashford Weston, Duchess of Ravenscroft, was finally, completely, perfectly happy. Their story would be whispered about in London society for years to come. Some would call it scandalous, others would call it romantic. But Eleanor and Alexander didn't care what anyone said. They knew the truth. They had found each other in darkness and created their own light. They had proven that love could bloom in the most unexpected places. Even, or perhaps especially, in a leper colony where a duchess met her duke. And they lived, as all the best love stories promise, happily ever after.